that is more or less my update for today, and we're going to get right into Glenn Helgason's presentation. So Glenn was one of the initial guys that saw the opportunity in Bio-Sul and has been with us from the start. He works with Terry on the agronomy side on his substantially large farm at Home Lake. I think that Glenn Helgason just saw the opportunity and has this extreme entrepreneurial bent and has been really successful in a lot of different ventures and has been a huge supporter and a great dealer and worked with the product as much as anybody. And at the Trusted Applicator Summit in Regina in July, Glenn gave a really good presentation. The feedback that I got was that it was one of the better presentations of the entire event, and we had a lot of strong agronomists and other people at the event. So I think that tells you a little bit about the caliber of what Glenn's going to tell you here. So I just wanted to give Glenn the opportunity, the platform here, to share with you guys. It's going to be a sales and spreading and agronomic talk. A lot of good points here. And so without further ado, Glenn, I'm going to let you talk, and I'll move the slides ahead here as you tell your story here about your adventure in Bio-Sul.
Okay, well, thanks, Dan. I'll run through this fairly quick. A lot of you guys have seen it, and I think what we need to do is get down to the key points that I was attempting to make in the presentation. I guess the first time I've seen this product was at Dan's brothers Terry's Sugar Growth Field Day out at Langenberg at the farm, July 2015. Elson did an excellent job, and I was there first time, like I say, saw the product, and the sad part is we like to complicate things, so the more complicated everything is, the better. We've been taught that for years. In reality, this simplifies things. So next slide, Dan. So I guess, this is what happens if you try, Eberhardt's were burning Bio-Sul in their feed grain pellet heater for the shop. So I would recommend, that's usually what happens if you try heat with this stuff, with a forced air furnace. It doesn't work very good. Anyway, next slide, down. Okay, so, like I say, what I got from Elson that day, and it's like I say, I can only pick up about 3 things at once. So what I picked up was you apply a huge amount, it lasts long, and it's extremely simple. Well, obviously, we've been taught the more complicated things are, the better. So I guess on my drive home, it was like an hour and a half drive home. I'm thinking, well, this is no good. I'm used to introducing complexity and layers of more headache on the farm. This is too simple. How do I put complexity into it? Obviously, I think any of us being trusted applicators know that it's not the nicest product to apply. So I guess that was the reason why I became a trusted applicator, was allow me to not only hit the goals of saving tons of money, where we save approximately $80,000 to $90,000 a year, but I was still able to make it somewhat complicated. Next slide, down. Okay, so I guess what happened from there, I bought a 4940 spreader. I went to Ritchie Brothers auction sale and bought a rock truck. So it's a tandem truck with a vibrating box on it and slides and a couple belt conveyors to load it. So I was ready to start spreading Bio-Sul. Next slide, down. So that's what I've got set up at the farm. What we do is we tender everything within we've gone as far as 40 miles, but obviously with the Stone Slinger truck, we can, legally you can't, but theoretically, it has been known it'll haul 18 to 19 tons. That gives us enough for, pretty well 200 acres. Next slide, down. So I guess my employees are always Snapchatting stuff. Next slide, down. And this one comes down. Meet the man who was working in reform prisons, so they're nicer when he finally murders his boss. So, like I say, with me, complexity is good. Complexity doesn't always make you money. Complexity employees don't necessarily like. But, this hasn't been a real tough product to apply. We've always applied it from my main site, at Foam Lake here. It's scaled. I've got scales on the spreader, but the rock truck has scaled as well. So, we've applied likely 30,000 acres of this product. It's unbelievable the accuracy. We're doing the pan test, but like our variance range is between 218 and 222 pounds an acre. It's unbelievable how you can get that narrow accuracy on a variable product with variable amounts of moisture in every load coming into the piles and stuff like that. So I'm very happy. A lot of our sectional drills and that we're like 20-25% across 80 feet, where we're spreading at 60 feet and we're seeing within 1 or 2%. Anyway, I guess that fall I applied 4,000 acres my own land. Next slide down. Obviously, we had concerns, about the bridging strategy of sulfur. Obviously, the Bio-Sul gets linked in with the elemental sulfur, which has the disclaimer, this stuff isn't readily available. Yes, it's a great product, but it's slow to release, and if you apply it, you may not see any benefit, without a bridging strategy. So that fall, we did some work with sulfur fines head-to-head with the Bio-Sul. Next slide down. So this is what we found, and I guess what we do is, because sulfur is so variable across the field, it's been proven and kind of industry accepted that soil sampling doesn't give you a very good indication of sulfur levels. For a main reason, you can have, and Elson has shown it in several presentations, you can have really hot spots of sulfur where you've got, like 100 times more sulfur than what the plant's required, but that's only in a couple sites. And if you hit one of those sites, it'll show you've got way in excess sulfur levels on your soil sample, where in reality, like 80% of the field needed sulfur. So I guess that brings me back to some of Terry's comments and Dan's on VRing this product. I guess my thought on the VR is, and I'm moving to that thought on a lot of our acres, that there's like 10% on average of the land that I farm where I don't even get my inputs back. Well, obviously, when you're talking VR with Bio-Sul, I don't really care if it's a hot spot of sulfur or whether it's got none in it. It shouldn't have any sulfur. So our next application, it's going to be some VR, and maybe putting higher levels, but definitely, likely 15% of my acreage space won't get any. So if you're talking, $40 an acre, applied cost over 5 years, you take 15% of that, well, there's $6-7 an acre. So by being able to VR, in my mind, covers the cost of custom application. So I guess that's going to be another tool in my toolbox as we move forward. The problem is the clients that, you're going to be spreading on are going to have some sort of map or identify the 15% where you want the thing shut off. So I guess that's moving on to a little bit of a sales experiment. Now moving on to the tissue test. We tissue test all of our land 3 times a year. For sulfur, that's the best way to give you an idea of what's happening in the plant and what's going on. And what we're finding from the Bio-Sul sulfur tissue test, they're all hitting home runs. We did the tissue test. This is on the sulfur fines versus the Bio-Suls. What we saw was in both cases the sulfur levels are through the roof. And what we're finding with the sulfur levels is it's bringing a lot of our micros up. The more sulfur in the plant, definitely more N. The plant seems to be pulling. But we're also seeing, our P and K, our boron, and some of the other micronutrients, get pulled up. So, and obviously it's like, and I don't like horses, but I use it as an example. It's like the old draft horses. It's all about nutrition. We've been led to believe that we can buy a lot of these products, apply very little of it. They can't really put on the label what it is because it's such great stuff. But you try give a draft horse pulling a plow, a shooter glass full of nutrients for the day, or give it a 5-gallon pail of chop, and I guess that's what I would compare the sulfur to, for the same price. I know which horse is going to do more work, and face, you got to treat your crop the same way. Next slide down. Okay, so this was the sulfur fines, the ammonium sulfate. So you'll notice it was the previous slide was the Bio-Sul, where we put 100 with the anhydrous direct seeding. We put 140 pounds of N with the seed in a direct seeding system. This slide shows the the ammonium sulfate put on in the fall. Obviously, most falls are wet. We were very wet that year. So what I did was we put 25 pounds of actual N with the sulfur fines. And obviously, when you're applying it on the wet surface, in the fall, I always question the value of the N. Well, obviously, you can see the previous slide, the N was, up with the Bio-Sul in the high. This slide is showing the N, a lot of it gets denitrified into the atmosphere. So, and then that's the main competition in this area is sulfur fines. Myself, I would never apply sulfur fines unless it was post-seeding or just before seeding, just because of the volatilization of the N. In that sulfur fines, likely there was likely about $8 an acre worth of N in that 20.50024, and I would question whether I got half use of it. Now, to be fair, that's my personal opinion of the sulfur fines. I'm not going to go stand on a soapbox and say, well, sulfur fines, you aren't getting no use out of the N. My feel is you're applying a very, very fine particle of N on the soil in the fall on a wet surface that, I question the value of that. Next slide down. Okay, so then let's go through this. This was the second tissue test right prior to bolting on that field with the Bio-Sul. Obviously, you can see the sulfur's pulling hard. You can see the boron levels; they're pulling hard the micros, and that's what we're finding on all of our tissue tests. And this is over 3 years. We've likely done equivalent 35,000 acres in tissue tests. The higher the sulfur levels, the higher it's pulling everything else up. This is a nice crop coming, so the N was starting to right at bolting. You can see the N is pulling hard. That's why I guess we're moving to more thoughts of we're going to be putting N-serve kits on both drills and trying to get some of that N. We're starting to move down the bell curve July 1st when the crops are starting to really pull the N. So we're going to look at some other products to see if we can kind of move that bell curve out about another 2 weeks. Next slide down. Okay, this is the one with the ammonium sulfate. You can see the sulfur level is good, but the N is even pulled down more. So, come back to my initial observation of what I think, how much value we're getting out of fall applied ammonia sulfur fines. I question, but next slide down. Okay, so we did the thing on wheat, barley, and peas, same results. The one thing, and whether it's nice or wrong, I spent the first fall likely $130,000 on the product. So, face it, I'm more the customer, not so much the supplier. That I'm doing this to find out if I'm getting a decent bang for my dollar, or whether this is something that maybe I'm maybe not reading right on, and I had the home runs on every field. It'd be different if you had one tissue sample kind of came back, and then you got to start making excuses. Well, I don't know what happened here, but they're all home runs. Keep going down. Okay, so this one here. Okay, this was one that getting back to the bridge strategy we did the next summer. It was a 800 acre field of canola seeded. We applied the Bio-Sul after seeding. When likely it was, the leaves were size of a toonie or so. So this was taken 7 days after application, and you can see the plants are right full of sulfur. So that's just showing you those small particle sizes are essentially the same as the small particle sizes in sulfur fines. They're they explode and they're in the plant within 7 days. Next slide down. This was right at, this is some peas. This is likely just prior to flowering, so you can see peas love sulfur. Normally in our area, just because in most cases everyone's using ammonium sulfate, so we were going through 12 to 14 Super Bs a year of this stuff running it through our drills. You can imagine hoses and logistics and stuff like that. Like I say, you apply this stuff and do your tissue tests, which give you your report card of when this stuff's running out. I'm hoping 5 years. It might be 4. It might be 6. It's all going to depend on, obviously, how much we pull out of the crop. The bigger crops we pull, the more sulfur we're going to pull, and obviously the more other nutrients that you've got to replace. Same with NP, NP and K. So anyway, it shows the P is right full of stuff. Normally, we only put sulfur on our canola land, so this just tells you that, hey, I've adapted a new plan for my application of sulfur, but it's not for only my canola. It's giving me results in the other crops you're growing. Every crop requires sulfur. We've been led to believe just put your sulfur dollar on the canola land because that's where you get your biggest bang for your buck. Well, I think this allows us to give us our biggest bang for our buck on whatever crop we grow. We've had some wet years. If you aren't able to seed due to too much flooding, this stuff isn't going anywhere. And that's why, like a variable particle size, I wouldn't want. That's why you wouldn't go apply 5 years worth of sulfur fines the first year, because that sulfur will convert so quick that it will leach through your soil, your root profile. Where this at a 20% approximately per year release does follow, kind of allow some of it not to possibly go out of get leached through your roots. So next slide down. Okay, so now we're moving on to, this is the second where we did the bridging strategy on post-seed application of canola. This was just prior to bolting, and you can see the plant's right full of sulfur. So I guess what that did was that took my full discussion of some sort of bridging strategy that, oh boy, this is an elemental product that you better, it's not going to kick in for a year or two. This stuff's kicking in. Look at the boron levels, the micros. And like I say, in all my tissues over the past 3 years, the higher the sulfur, everything else is pulled up. So that just means you've got better plant nutrition, got a healthier plant that'll withstand, environmental factors such as wind, drought, maybe not excessive rain, frost, other environmental factors like that. Next slide down. Okay, so I guess I talk a little bit because I'm a numbers guy, and I'm not going to go in and put a product on unless I see a financial return. I'm saving about $75,000 a year, and that's not including the cost of the infrastructure to bring in ammonium sulfate in December when it's minus 25 out, putting it in fertilizer bins, which they're $25,000 a bin. After 5 years, you better not kick the bin. You better tap with a light hammer, otherwise your foot will go through it. A lot of people don't understand the cost of belt conveyors and the logistics and your air drill, air tanks, metering systems getting eaten by ammonium sulfate. It's like I say, yes, a lot of people look at it and say, oh, it's $9, $10, $12 an acre to apply. That I'm throwing that money away. Well, they don't realize what their fixed cost is on their farms for labor and for just the infrastructure to handle other products. Next slide down. Okay, so now I guess we're done applying. We're doing custom right now. I'd done some last summer. We did a 3,500 acre client, and I went and tissued all of his fields, or a couple of his fields. He was amazed, and he must have told about 100 people at the progress show that he's been farming 35 years. progressive farmer. He says he's never bought anything from anyone who's gone out and showed him it works. And if for some reason that's a little bit of the problem with the Bio-Sul, we're always having to show this product works. This is no-brainer. You're putting 160 pounds of actual sulfur down. Bring it back to the workhorse. We're feeding it a couple pails of good chop a day versus a thimble full of some special nutrient. So I guess that's the challenge we've had. Any new product always seems to have that challenge. Like I say, and I buy lots of things. I've never had anyone go show me that stuff works. So, that was a little bit of a feather for BioCycle to allow me to do some of those tests just to show guys, this stuff is working. Next slide down. We'll keep going. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll move through, this was some of the product. This was canola and canola of a third party. So, I would consider this third party data. Stuff I've applied, but this is what the tissues look. This was canola and canola applied, post-seeding. The crop was already up. There's the rosette, right full of sulfur, right full of N. You look at the other macronutrients, and the micros are looking pretty good. The boron may be a little bit low, but we're starting to run into a little bit of a dry time right there, where boron is pulling from the top couple inches and it's kind of dried out. So, the boron isn't pulling into the roots quite as good just because of dryness. Next slide down. Okay, so I guess what's my spider sense telling me? And it's the whole agronomic picture. It's not so much just the Bio-Sul. The Bio-Sul is great. You're applying bugs to the soil, which help break down your other nutrients in the soil. You're applying lots and lots of particle sizes. We're a higher pH soil. In our area, which some of our micros and phos are getting tied up because of the high pH. Instead of applying the equivalent of 100 pounds of 20.50024, where you're putting 24, pounds in pearls on the field versus I'm putting 160 pounds in different size pearls. I'm making a lot more, 6 times more zones of little bits of acidity around the sulfur or Bio-Sul particle, which, and hopefully is releasing a little bit more phos into the roots, a little bit more of my micros, microbial activity. Obviously, any compost on the soil is good for it. We had a complaint of a client, I guess, this fall, where we applied this 3,500 acres, that somehow he got a sample of it. He obviously must have taken it off our truck when we were spreading or something, because I didn't give it to him. And he said the product just stunk. Well, we had quite a few loads with a fair bit of chicken manure in it. Well, obviously, the worse the product smells, the better it is. In my books, that chicken manure is full, has way more, N and phos and especially phos than what we're advertising, because we can't guarantee anything other than the sulfur level. But the worse it smells, the better it is in my books. So. So I guess that's kind of where the whole thing has come around. All my crops, I can't stand on the soapbox and saying, oh yeah, I'm getting 10, 12, 15% better because of my Bio-Sul. But my tissue samples are showing the great sulfur levels, pulling everything back up. Obviously, the more nutrients you have in the plant, and the higher it brings the bar up on all of them, obviously, the better crop you have to have. It's only common sense. So I guess that's kind of what my thoughts are on the product. So I guess if anyone has any questions, shoot them forward to me.
Thank you, Glenn, for that amazing testimonial. That is that's
let's not take a breath.
Excellent delivery. So my takeaways from what you had to say here today was that simplicity is really key, that it's one of the few products that you can actually use on your farm that's going to simplify your life, that if you're looking at ammonium sulfate fines versus elemental sulfur, you need to look at the potential losses of that nitrogen and factor that cost into what you're doing. That the adequate levels of sulfur in the mix for you has meant that your macros and your micros have shown up very, very strong over time. In your tissue tests, that for us as an industry, as a business, as a product, as a company, as a tribe, moving towards a variable rate will make sense long term. That showing your customer that it works with a very simple, cost-effective tissue test can move the needle in terms of customer satisfaction and retention, and showing people the reality that this product works really good through all kinds of conditions, through all kinds of rotations. And finally, the worse something smells, the better it is. So that was excellent. Thank you.